When we think of the ancient world, we often imagine towering temples, marble statues, and battles that shaped empires. But sometimes the true legacy of a civilization isn't found in its monuments or victories. It lies beneath our feet. Beneath the soil of Europe runs one of the greatest achievements in human history, the Roman road network. It wasn't just a system of travel. It was a system of power, discipline, and permanence. Each stone laid by Roman hands told a story, not of luxury or comfort, but of ambition, precision, and a desire to conquer time itself. These roads were the lines that connected the heart of an empire to its farthest edges, transforming landscapes, uniting peoples, and defining the very concept of civilization. There are moments in history when human ambition dares to challenge nature itself, when mountains, rivers, and time are no longer obstacles, but testaments to willpower. 2,000 years ago, one civilization did exactly that. While much of Europe remained a wilderness of forests and swamps, the Romans carved their mark across the continent, creating a network of roads so masterfully built that many still carry travelers today. These were not mere paths of stone. They were the veins of an empire, routes that carried legions, law, and power. Behind every mile of that stone lay discipline, precision, and an unrelenting desire to last forever. In an age when most of Europe was still untamed, Rome accomplished what no one else had imagined possible, an interconnected system that reshaped civilization itself. Without machines, without modern tools, the Romans achieved feats that few can replicate even today. They understood one truth above all others, that order and speed were the foundations of true power. Rome didn't just build roads. It built arteries through which its empire breathed. Legions marched upon them. Traders carried the wealth of continents, and imperial decrees flowed like blood through a living body. Centuries later, these same roads endure, outlasting empires, monarchs, and revolutions. While modern highways crumble within decades, Roman roads remain as silent monuments to discipline and design. But these roads were not born from a desire for comfort. They were instruments of war, strategic, purposeful, and absolute. Their purpose was not to connect people, but to control them. The Roman road system was the backbone of its military machine, the key to expansion and survival. It allowed the legions to move faster than any enemy could imagine, crushing rebellions, defending borders, and maintaining order across vast territories. Every Roman road was more than a route. It was a weapon. The principle behind their construction was unwavering, straightness at any cost. These roads did not meander or yield to the landscape. They cut through mountains, forests, and marshes in perfect lines, saving hours, sometimes days, for the soldiers who relied on them. Time was the empire's most precious resource, and every road was built with the same values that governed its armies: discipline, precision, and speed. Along these routes moved the messengers of the cursus publicus, the imperial postal system. They carried orders, intelligence, and decrees from Rome to the farthest provinces with astonishing efficiency. Mounted couriers switched horses at way stations along the route, ensuring that communication never stopped. This was the empire's nervous system, a living network that connected the heart of Rome to its most distant limbs. Without it, the empire would have collapsed under its own weight. Trade and civilian travel flourished as a result, but that was only a fortunate consequence. These roads were built for dominance. Each one stood as a declaration carved into the earth. This is Roman land. Straight and unyielding, they symbolized order imposed upon chaos. Travelers who walked upon them saw not just a path, but proof of empire. Every stone whispered the same silent truth: Rome was here. Rome still rules. It was no coincidence that the army itself was tasked with their construction. When the legions weren't fighting, they were building. Soldiers who once wielded swords now lifted stones, carving their empire into the landscape. Every man worked not for comfort, but for eternity. Discipline didn't end when the battle stopped. It simply changed form. Roads, bridges, fortifications, all were built by the same hands that conquered nations. The legions were not only Rome's sword, but its hammer. Each road was engineered with one purpose: to last for centuries. Roman engineers designed them in layers, compacted earth, gravel, stone, and paving slabs, each carefully aligned and sloped for drainage. Rainwater flowed off into side ditches, preserving the surface for generations. Their craftsmanship was so refined that many of these roads, untouched for 2,000 years, remain smoother than modern ones. Yet the true marvel lies not in their endurance, but in their precision. How could roads so straight and flawless be built without lasers, satellites, or machinery? The answer was ingenuity and an understanding of geometry and optics that was far ahead of its time. Roman surveyors used an instrument called the groma, a vertical pole with crossbars and plumb lines, to align perfect straight lines over vast distances. When hills obscured their view, scouts climbed high ground, lighting signal fires to create visual chains that stretched for miles. To control slopes and drainage, engineers relied on the horabates, a 6-meter-long beam with a water-filled groove that acted as a level. For more complex measurements, they turned to the dioptra, an ancient precursor to the modern theodolite, capable of measuring angles with extraordinary accuracy. With it, they could tunnel through mountains from opposite sides and meet perfectly in the middle. These tools, simple in appearance yet ingenious in function, allowed Rome to bend the natural world to its will. In the hands of disciplined engineers, they became instruments of transformation, capable of turning chaos into order, wilderness into civilization. Through calculation, perseverance, and vision, the Romans achieved what seemed impossible. They turned the very landscape into an extension of their power. The roads of Rome were more than stone and sweat. They were declarations of intent, arteries of conquest, and the foundation upon which an empire stood. Through them, Rome extended its reach from Britain to Egypt, from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. They were not built for comfort, but for eternity. Even now, 2,000 years later, they remind the world of a timeless truth: that real power is not found in what conquers the moment, but in what endures beyond it. The Romans built more than infrastructure, they built legacy. Their secret was not divine favor, but the mastery of geometry, mathematics, and discipline. They understood that power was not only seized through war, but preserved through connection, through arteries of stone that united the far corners of their dominion. The Roman road was both an achievement of science and a monument to order. It represented the Roman mind, logical, exact, and unwilling to yield to nature. What we see today as ancient ruins are, in truth, fragments of a vision that placed reason above all else, and in doing so, gave the world a blueprint for civilization itself. Every Roman road began far beneath the surface, born not merely from the laying of stone, but from an unshakable philosophy that permanence could be engineered. The architects of Rome did not simply build for the present. They constructed for eternity. Each project began with a trench carved deep into the earth, sometimes descending over 1.5 meters. This was not guesswork, it was precision. Roman engineers understood that to defeat nature, one must anticipate it. They dug below the frost line so that the cold of winter could never crack their work. At the base of the trench lay the statumen, a foundation of large, irregular stones fitted tightly together like a puzzle crafted by patience itself. This was the skeleton of the road, providing both stability and a natural channel for drainage, ensuring that even after storms, the path remained firm and dry. Above the statumen came the rudis, a compact blend of gravel, lime, and crushed stones. This layer was meticulously hammered and tamped until it fused into a near-solid mass. Then came the nucleus, the living heart of the road, a mixture of sand, fine gravel, and hot lime mortar. While still warm, This early form of concrete bonded the layers below into a single, enduring body of stone. Capping it all was the summum dorsum, or pavimentum, composed of large, flat slabs placed so tightly that even centuries later, water and time could not find their way between them. Each slab was slightly arched at the center, allowing rainwater to drain off toward ditches that flanked the road. The effect was both elegant and utilitarian, a seamless harmony between form and function. This was how Rome engineered immortality, with geometry, precision, and an unwavering refusal to accept decay. Constructing such perfection demanded not just skill, but an empire's worth of effort. Along the routes of planned roads, quarries roared with activity. Soldiers, enslaved laborers, and local craftsmen worked side by side, striking the earth with iron tools until it yielded to their will. Massive blocks were hauled away on wooden sledges or dragged behind teams of oxen. In regions blessed with navigable rivers, barges carried stones downstream, transforming natural waterways into arteries of construction. The logistics behind each road mirrored the organization of a military campaign, disciplined, hierarchical, and relentless. Every mile of stone was the product of coordination between architects, surveyors, masons, and laborers, all united by a single imperial purpose: to bind the vast Roman world together. Among Rome's greatest secrets was its legendary concrete, known as opus caementitium. Unlike the weak lime mortars of other civilizations, Roman concrete possessed a strength that bordered on the miraculous. Its power came from volcanic ash called pozzolana, quarried from the earth near Naples. When mixed with lime and water, this substance could harden underwater, a property that revolutionized ancient construction. It was the key ingredient in the aqueducts that spanned valleys, the harbors that defied the sea, and the bridges that carried legions across rivers. Scientists still marvel at its resilience, discovering that its chemical composition allows it to heal over time, as moisture triggers a slow reaction that reseals its cracks. In the nucleus of Roman roads, this concrete transformed stone into structure, creating pathways that would outlast the empire itself. To sustain such monumental production, lime kilns burned without pause across the empire, their flames fueled by entire forests. The glow of these fires was, in a sense, the pulse of Roman civilization, the light of endurance made visible. Yet even with these materials, the brilliance of Roman engineering lay not in what they used, but in how they adapted. When geography resisted, Rome refused to yield. In the face of mountains, its engineers became sculptors of the earth. They did not wind their roads timidly around obstacles, they cut through them. Using fire and water, they cracked stone walls and carved their way through cliffs that would have defeated lesser civilizations. The process was painstaking, often taking years, but the Romans measured progress not in days, but in centuries. Their ambition was absolute. When their roads crossed swamps or floodplains, the Romans elevated the very ground beneath them. They constructed embankments known as agers, colossal artificial ridges of packed earth and stone, sometimes soaring 10 meters high. At the base, they often laid a lattice of timber logs, crisscrossed like the bones of a giant, to distribute weight evenly across soft terrain. Above this, layers of gravel and stone created a foundation immune to the whims of water. Through these methods, the Romans conquered terrain that others deemed impossible, raising dry, steady highways over shifting mud and floodplain alike. Rivers, too, were obstacles that Rome met with artistry. Their bridges were more than utilitarian structures. They were triumphs of geometry. Based on the perfect symmetry of the semicircular arch, Roman bridges distributed immense weight across their stone piers with flawless balance. These piers, anchored deep within riverbeds, were shaped like wedges to cut through the current, allowing water and debris to flow past harmlessly. To construct them, the Romans invented the cofferdam, a sealed wooden enclosure that diverted water and created dry working conditions even in the middle of a river. Within these dams, masons worked as if on solid ground, laying stones with mathematical precision. Some of these bridges, like the Pont du Gard in France or the Alcanar Bridge in Spain, still stand today, untouched by centuries of flood, storm, and time. When mountains grew too vast to carve, Roman engineers turned their gaze beneath them. They dug tunnels, dark, narrow veins through living rock, sometimes starting from both ends and meeting in the middle with astonishing accuracy. Achieving this demanded not only technical knowledge, but also the courage to defy the unseen. These tunnels could take decades to complete, yet they were pursued with the same patience and determination that defined every Roman work. The Romans believed that nature existed not to be feared, but to be disciplined. Even in the damp, unstable soils of northern Europe, their ingenuity never faltered. To build roads across swamps and bogs, they first laid wooden platforms made of thick logs arranged lengthwise and crosswise. On top of this, they placed stones and gravel, creating a stable base that floated above the mud. This method, both simple and revolutionary, allowed Rome's roads to extend into regions where no other civilization had dared to build. The result was a network that spanned over 400,000 kilometers, binding together deserts, forests, mountains, and marshlands under one enduring design. The genius of Roman engineering was not just its scale or precision, but its philosophy. Every problem had a solution. Every landscape could be mastered. To the Romans, there was no such thing as impossible. They believed that the earth itself could be persuaded to serve human order. And so they carved, drained, bridged, and paved until the empire was laced with the stony arteries through which it breathed and thrived. Each completed road stood as more than a means of travel. It was a declaration of power. When the last stone was set and the road stretched toward the horizon, it symbolized Rome's dominion over nature and time. Through these roads marched armies that expanded the empire's borders. Along them traveled merchants carrying silks, spices, and silver. And upon them rode couriers bearing the decrees of emperors, their horses galloping across history's most enduring stage. The roads were the pulse of Rome, disciplined, unwavering, eternal. In the next chapter, the story moves beyond stone and structure into the living world that grew along these ancient highways. Life on the Roman roads was more than mere travel. It was civilization in motion. From the mist-shrouded coasts of Britannia to the scorching deserts of Arabia, the roads carried not only soldiers and merchants, but the ideas, languages, and cultures that wove the empire together. Milestones, or miliaria, lined the roads at precise intervals, guiding travelers like silent sentinels of empire. Each bore the name of an emperor, a distance to the next city, or the mark of the engineer who built it, a timeless record of order and precision. Every few miles stood small stations called mutations, where couriers of the cursus publicus could exchange their weary horses for fresh ones. This state-run postal system, unmatched in the ancient world, allowed messages to travel at astonishing speeds, sometimes crossing entire provinces in a matter of days. Larger stations, known as mansions, offered rest to travelers and officials. Equipped with stables, baths, and comfortable lodgings, they reflected the Roman belief that infrastructure was not merely a necessity, but a symbol of civilization itself. Merchants, soldiers, and pilgrims alike found shelter along these routes, in taverns that ranged from refined hostels to raucous dens of travelers' tales. Through these roads, Rome built more than a network. It built a living empire. The stones carried armies, the inns housed ambition, and the milestones marked the rhythm of a civilization that refused to stand still. Even now, beneath the dust of centuries, those same roads remain, quiet, enduring, and unmistakably Roman, reminders that some paths were made not just to be walked, but to last forever. Security was not merely an accessory to the Roman world. It was the lifeblood that kept its vast network of roads alive. Across the empire's endless web of stone and dust, patrols of legionnaires and auxiliary troops roamed tirelessly. They were not conquering armies, but guardians of order, ensuring that the roads remained safe for merchants, messengers, and travelers of every province. Their presence turned desolate landscapes into secure arteries of civilization. Through thick forests, lonely plains, and treacherous mountain passes, Roman discipline made the impossible possible. Under their watchful eyes, merchants could journey from the misty shores of Britannia to the burning deserts of Syria with a level of safety unmatched anywhere else in the ancient world. Behind this visible order stood an unseen force of administration, a bureaucratic marvel that only Rome could have conceived. Road curators, appointed directly by the emperor or sanctioned by the Senate, held absolute authority over the empire's infrastructure. They were engineers, managers, and accountants all at once. Every crack in a pavement, every missing stone, every collapsed milestone was noted, reported, and repaired. The Roman obsession with order and record-keeping ensured that even the smallest detail of road maintenance was meticulously preserved in archives that chronicled the empire's pulse. This symphony of precision transformed the Roman road from a simple military necessity into one of the greatest engines of economic transformation the world had ever seen. Grain from Gaul, olive oil from Hispania, marble from Greece, and wine from the vineyards of Campania flowed across the empire at unprecedented speed. Farmers in distant provinces discovered new markets for their crops. Artisans and craftsmen who once lived in isolation found themselves connected to bustling trade routes where demand never ceased. Villages that once clung to survival grew into thriving market towns. Entire cities rose where roads intersected, their prosperity measured by their proximity to the imperial highways. To live near a Roman road was to live in the path of fortune. Distance from it often meant distance from progress itself. In time, transport companies appeared, sophisticated enterprises that could rival modern logistics. They managed fleets of wagons, trained teams of mules, and established way stations stocked with food, water, and spare wheels. Couriers operated on strict timetables, carrying messages sealed with the emperor's insignia. Warehouses were built in dozens of cities, ensuring the seamless movement of goods and people across thousands of kilometers. The Roman road system was not only a triumph of engineering, but of organization, a living, breathing mechanism that allowed the empire to function as a single, synchronized body. This efficiency extended far beyond trade. Governance itself was revolutionized. Tax collectors could now reach even the most remote corners of the empire within days. Reports from distant provinces arrived in Rome faster than ever before, allowing emperors to rule lands they might never see with near-instant awareness of events unfolding at their borders. The same roads that carried armies also carried ideas, philosophies, languages, and faiths that would shape the spiritual and intellectual destiny of Europe. Along these highways walked philosophers discussing Stoic ideals, Christian preachers spreading their faith, and scholars carrying manuscripts that would outlive the empire that built the roads beneath their feet. Yet behind all this grandeur lay an enormous cost, a burden paid in sweat, labor, and lives. Building and maintaining such an immense network demanded unimaginable resources. Tens of thousands of soldiers, slaves, and local workers labored day and night, quarrying stone, digging trenches, and laying foundations. Under the relentless Mediterranean sun or in the frozen winds of the northern provinces, they worked with a discipline that bordered on devotion. Every layer of road was a testament to endurance. The statument of large stones, the rudis of gravel and lime, the nucleus of hot mortar, and the polished pavimentum of stone slabs above all. The empire invested heavily in wages, tools, and raw materials, all funded by the taxes of conquered lands. Ironically, Many of the very people Rome had subdued found themselves building the same roads that allowed their conquerors to maintain control. Yet even they became part of something greater, a project that transcended individual lives and centuries. The Romans believed that infrastructure was not merely practical, but sacred, that to build a road was to build civilization itself. As the centuries passed, the roads carried more than goods and armies. They carried the destiny of an empire. But when the empire's strength began to wane, when its treasury ran dry and its legions were stretched thin across distant frontiers, the cracks began to show. Roads once maintained with religious devotion began to decay. Bridges crumbled, milestones eroded, and travelers grew wary of the bandits that returned to haunt the neglected routes. In time, the same roads that had once carried the legions of Rome to conquest now carried its enemies inward: Visigoths, Vandals, and countless others who followed the ancient highways toward the heart of empire. The arteries of power became the veins of its undoing. And yet, even in decay, the genius of Roman engineering refused to die. Their roads survived the fall of emperors, the ruin of cities, and the passage of time itself. The secret of their endurance lay in three unshakable principles: superior materials, precise engineering, and perfect drainage. The Romans understood that water was the great destroyer of stone. So they built roads with deep foundations, layered surfaces, and raised centers that allowed rain to flow harmlessly into side ditches. They used volcanic ash to create a concrete so strong that modern engineers still marvel at its resilience. These principles, born from necessity and perfected through experience, gave Roman roads a lifespan that defied centuries. At the heart of it all stood the Militarium Aureum, the golden milestone. Set in the Roman Forum by Emperor Augustus, it was from this shining pillar that all distances across the empire were measured. It was more than a monument. It was the spiritual center of the Roman world, the symbolic point from which civilization radiated outward. Long after Rome's banners fell, these roads remained as silent witnesses to the empire's greatness. Pilgrims, merchants, and kings of the Middle Ages still walked their paths, often unaware that beneath their feet lay the foundations of an empire that had once ruled the known world. Today, to stand upon the surviving stones of a Roman road is to stand in the shadow of eternity. The worn surface, polished by centuries of footsteps and hooves, still bears the imprints of the lives that passed over it. Soldiers marching to distant wars, traders carrying amphorae of wine and oil, couriers racing with messages that could change the fate of nations. Each stone whispers a fragment of their stories, echoing through time with the same clarity that once bound the empire together. The Romans built not for a decade, not for a century, but for eternity. Their roads remind us that true greatness lies not in conquest or wealth, but in creation, in the things we build that outlive us. The Roman road was more than stone and lime. It was a vision of permanence, an act of faith in the endurance of human order. It was civilization made tangible, a masterpiece of human ambition and discipline. And so, as we walk those ancient paths today, we trace not only the routes of an empire, but the footprints of its spirit, a reminder that time may erode kingdoms, but it cannot erase the legacy of those who built with purpose.